Right now, it's John McKay, President and CEO of the Mississippi Manufacturers Association. John, always good to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, I got to believe you've been a bit busy with this tsunami of activity that could affect your members and the manufacturing industry in particular, in general, with the president's announcements with respect to tariffs. What is coming from your world on that?
Yeah, no, it's obviously been busy, and this is a great example of elections have consequences. This is a thing that President Trump campaigned on, and so it should come as no surprise that he's followed through. But so I've been talking to my counterparts around the country, as well as our national association that has deep ties to the manufacturing bases of Canada and Mexico in particular. And we're just trying to assess what impacts this type of thing will have on us. And one of the key statistics that I like to bring up in this conversation is about a third of all manufacturing inputs for our manufacturers in the United States come from those two countries.
Interesting.
So a third of all manufacturing.
So let me stop it right there, because we were just talking about that on the show when we had someone. And I think this is a sort of a common statement you would hear from the public is, well, just stop buying their stuff if it gets too expensive. But I think what's not understood is it's the components in goods that are ultimately manufactured and assembled in this country, and those increase the cost of inputs, which requires generally some adjustment to the price of that the manufacturer charges to whomever the end user, the end customer is.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. And then what, obviously businesses don't plan weeks out, they plan years out.
Yeah.
And so you've sort of baked in the supply chain, and obviously our neighbors are great trading partners, and we've had this relationship for decades and decades. Well, when those component parts start to get out of whack and move the needle on your product cost, then you start looking for other manufacturers, maybe in a country that does not have the similar imposed tariffs. So it really skews the natural order of global trade. And obviously we see what happens when supply chains get out of whack. It really causes some shocks to everything in the system.
So the president says that we shouldn't be too concerned, that it may be some short-term pain for some long-term gain. How do your members feel about that?
Well, look, I mean, if we've looked at survey data over the last couple of years, and if you look, I mean, a lot of them are fed up with some of these countries, particularly China, that steal intellectual property, and really they do a lot of nefarious things on their side, and so. Our members generally support actions that bring those type of activities to a stop. And so I think what you see, and again, you kind of see it happening right now with Mexico already coming to the table and the president agreeing for a pause in their tariffs. We have the president issued a national emergency for, the drugs coming across the border and illegals coming across the border. And that is what allows him to do these emergency tariffs.
Yeah.
Well, they need to get a handle on that. And I think Mexico's come to the table and said, OK, we hear you and we're going to try to address it. And maybe we can negotiate some other recourse than blanket tariffs.
Yeah, and that's the goal. I mean, Mr. Trump's a master negotiator, art of the deal, the whole deal, and his background, and of course, negotiating deals for giant sums of money for big real estate projects in New York. I mean, that's like the ultimate scenario for negotiating, no doubt.
Yep.
And so he's really good at that. It's hard to predict how the other side will react. In this case, Mexico capitulated, and less than 24 hours to go to the tariffs go into effect. There is a meeting scheduled, as you know, with Prime Minister Trudeau. My gut feel is later today that your members could perhaps be more hurt with the Canadian tariffs. Is that true, John? Because you just said about the 30% of the inputs. Yeah.
And I went, before I came on, I wanted to make sure I had these numbers correct. So in the roughly $13 billion of exports in 2023 for Mississippi manufacturers, $2.1 billion went to Canada and $1.9 went to Mexico.
Okay.
So you're looking at almost $2 billion each. So, I mean, that's a third of our products that we manufacture here go to those two countries. And so you absolutely have that uncertainty.
Yeah.
And we were talking about that earlier. Businesses really can't thrive and plan when there's a bunch of uncertainty in the mix. And so I think what we would like to see is obviously get some of these national security concerns taken care of, and then have the free flow of trade back the way it should be, because these tariffs really do distort the market in ways that most people don't really understand. I mean, you've seen already some of the currency markets where the dollar is actually getting stronger compared to these other currencies. Well, some people cheer that, but again, that's going to really make it much more expensive for other countries to buy our products.
Yeah, so it perhaps benefits to some extent American consumers because their dollar goes further to buy foreign imported goods. But the inverse of that is your members, for example, who manufacture things, want to sell them in Canada, it requires more Canadian currency to buy the American product.
That's right. That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's the flip of that. I'm all for King Dollar, and
right.
I think overall it's in our best interest.
Absolutely.
But there's got to be some degree of balance because we do rely on foreign customers.
Yep.
That's
100%.
just a fact.
It's just facts.
Yeah. Let's talk about closer to home.
Yeah.
Nissan.
Yeah.
We got a factory right up the road here in Canton, Mississippi. It's no secret. The Nissan CEO came out 2 or 3 months ago, said, we don't get something straightened out in 12 months, we're no longer a going concern, essentially, is the accounting terminology you'd see in an audit report. And I don't really know. I haven't looked at their audit. Maybe they got a going concern opinion when you got the CEO providing that sort of guidance. Yeah. But what are you hearing? How could that affect Mississippi?
Well, so I think obviously the news of the voluntary separations that they put out to employees the other day got headlines, which it normally does. But the one thing to keep in mind there is Nissan has never laid any full-time employees off. They've never done that in the history of their plant here. And I think actually in the history of their North American operation.
It's amazing.
So that is an amazing statistic. And so this doesn't change that. This is them trying to right size through voluntary separations. They've put together a great package for folks that are nearing the end of their career with Nissan. And so I think as that works its way out over the next 6 to 9 months, you're going to see a correction in their footprint employee size. But really, this goes back to really market forces. Nissan, along with a lot of other autos, went all in on the EV type sector. And I think you've just seen, there's a lot of reasons, and we can get into the details if you want to, but I think you've seen a realization that market might not be as fast moving as once thought. The infrastructure around the country has to catch up to that. And so I think you've seen them push their launch date for their all-EV lines further out, and this is just a reflection of that.
Yeah.
And I think the other big piece of this, and we talk about this a lot, is automation. Quite frankly, we're just not going to need as many people going forward, and the auto sector is on the cutting edge of advanced manufacturing.
No doubt about it.
And that is going to be a big part of this as it plays out.
But John, that's an issue throughout the entire manufacturing industry, as you well know. And I think we focus too much in politics about manufacturing jobs. Mm-hmm. And the latest statistics I saw that are published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, I think it's now less than 10%. It may be 10 to 12%, maybe, of the total
think that might be
workforce.
The national number.
Right.
Yeah,
it's manufacturing. Mm-hmm. And I'm only pointing that out because you wouldn't have to go too far back in time to find that was probably triple that. Yeah. Right? We were kind of a manufacturing and an agricultural economy. And so through the years, think about agriculture. I remember studying this in econ a long time ago. Is a third of our workers were in the agriculture business in the 1930s, and we struggled to feed ourselves. Now we got a bounty of food. We export it. It's like 3% of our total workforce is in agriculture. Well, manufacturing's been experiencing that same sort of improvement and revelation just because of automation.
That's right. 100%. The productivity level has gone through the roof,
which benefits all of us.
100%.
But
Absolutely.
it's not where you can say, hey, we need more manufacturing jobs. No, we actually don't need those jobs.
We need more manufacturing. That's right.
Not necessarily jobs in the country.
Will be lesser than they were 20 years ago, no doubt.
I got it.
Yeah.
John McKay, President CEO of Mississippi Manufacturing Association. It's coming right back in the Element Well studio. Segment on middays. We're back with you in the Element Well studio. Our guest is John McKay, President and CEO of the Mississippi Manufacturers Association. John, let's turn our attention more locally. I've seen you a couple of times there down at the Capitol. It's busy as well, quite active at the Mississippi State Capitol. What are you working on down there this year?
It's the busy season. Tomorrow is a very important deadline, which is the first hurdle to get bills, general bills, out of their first committee. So that's something we keep a tight eye on. It's very typical. Obviously this session has really focused on taxes kind of coming out of the gate, and that's something that will be involved in discussions with both the House with their House Bill 1 and the Senate. I understand they're working on a plan, and it should be out in the next week or two. That'll be a great opportunity to really talk to each side about the impact that those bills might have on industry. But, every year I walk into that session, and one of the main focus areas is always going to be workforce development.
Sure.
We have got to continue to move that needle. We've made great strides with the Standing Up Accelerate Mississippi and the Office of Workforce Development, and really focusing on those career tracks that have the best outcomes for students, whether they come straight out of high school with a CTE certificate, continue their education in the community college system, which we have a fantastic community college system, or move on to the IHL system, which produces some of our great professionals.
Right.
Not only do we need to train, but we need to get them jobs that are here in Mississippi, and that's a real big focus. So we're going to continue to do that. There's several good pieces of legislation that focus on that core CTE function, and hopefully we get some stuff over the finish line.
Okay. Well, speaking of tax reform, you mentioned it. That's the top priority in the House.
Yep.
Speaker of the House, Jason White, has indicated that. The governor in his State of the State clearly focused, hyper-focused on that. I think, as you said, in discussions with senators, in particular Senator Josh Harkins, he of course chairs Senate Finance Committee. He said they've got something they're cooking on as well. Mm-hmm. So may kind of get something in the middle. But where does your association, your members stand on this?
Yeah, it's a great question. No, first of all, I want to commend Speaker White and his team, Chairman Lamar. They're fantastic to work with. And the plan they've come out with is a really solid plan. I've talked to them over the years. The House has had iterations of different tax reform legislation, and this is a fantastic model that they've come out with. A lot of moving parts and pieces, and our folks are still analyzing maybe direct impacts on their businesses. But I'll have to say the amount of infrastructure investment that they have in their plan is incredible, and it really is transformational. It's an opportunity for us to really invest. And I always tell people, if I could wave a magic wand, we need to invest in people and infrastructure. If we do those two things, we'll come out ahead in the state. And so this piece that really tackles infrastructure, and it's not just MDOT. Obviously, we need to get Brad White and his folks all the resources we can, but it's the focus on the other modes of transportation. We have a fantastic port network here, our airports, the rail. We've got a lot of the infrastructure in place, but we need some upgrades, some expansions to really prove that we can be a hub of trade.
So that's a good point. I think it gets overlooked when you talk about supporting either growth of existing manufacturing within the state, existing manufacturing facilities, factories, so to speak, and recruiting and attracting new manufacturing. Infrastructure is pretty high on their list.
Oh, absolutely.
Data centers, it's power.
Right.
You know that.
Yep.
They don't have a bunch of trucks coming in and out of a data center delivering things or shipping things. Manufacturers, it's quite the opposite.
Absolutely.
There's a whole bunch of trucks coming in, bringing the raw material, and a whole bunch of trucks or trains, as the case may be, rail as well, right?
Absolutely.
Delivering those finished goods to the market.
Yeah, well, it's incredible. I mean, and you look at some of the manufacturers on the Gulf Coast. I mean, they're getting some of their raw material off of barges. barges.
That's right. The port's there.
Yep, and it's so all of those things are really, really critical to manufacturing operations, and I think you've heard Governor Reeves talk about it. Right now, when you're looking to locate a manufacturer, it's speed to market. Well, if you don't already have a pretty robust infrastructure network in place, they're going to balk.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just not going to go there because they need things quick. If they can get that building up and the machinery in place, they're ready to crank out product. They don't need to wait on a road to be built or us to go through a phase 1 environmental to see if we can put that turning lane in.
So as you know, and I suspect this is what you're referring to, the House bill, HB 1, would in fact impose a 5% sales tax on motor fuel purchases, and those monies would be dedicated, just as is the excise tax, to the State Highway Fund, the Department of Transportation. It's estimated, depending on who you hear, estimated somewhere between $350, $400 million. However, keep in mind that they would lose the $80 million that they presently receive from the Alice G. Clark Lottery Act. So let's say a net of about $300 million to $180 million. I mean, that's a significant shot in the arm to an agency that currently operates on about 1.4 billion. Pardon me. I'm thinking federal government here. Pardon me.
But Brad would like that trillion.
Love that trillion.
Over there.
I mean, is that kind of the way?
No, that's absolutely right. And I think the thing you have to focus on, both the kind of what most people think of as the roads and bridges that MDOT works on, those other modes, there's a tremendous amount of federal money that flows, from the feds to the states. And if we don't have the matching dollars here at the state level, those dollars go somewhere else. And so it's incredibly important. And that's one of the things when you hear, folks at MDOT talk about this, it's that dedicated recurring revenue that's so important, so that we know every year roughly how much money might be coming in, and then we can go leverage those federal dollars, because in most cases you're talking 3, 4, 5x the federal return on that one Mississippi dollar we invest.
It's what Brad really has harped on. I mean, he's focused on that.
100%.
I say harp. He doesn't harp. He's not. He doesn't really speak that way. But he repeats it regularly. He points it out.
He explains it to the policymakers in a way that they can understand that if we don't do this in a strategic way, we're really leaving a lot of money on the table, and other states are going to capitalize on that. And we just can't have that.
Yeah, and as you well know, the state's excise tax on fuel has been steady since 1987. It's 18.4 cents. I'm in the process of writing an article. I think I shared that with you a minute ago. But about this tax bill, in the article, I produced a little chart that shows Mississippi and how it compares to our neighboring states across the various tax categories: income tax, grocery sales tax, non-grocery property taxes. But let's talk about excise taxes. To your point about infrastructure, we have the lowest of all the neighboring states. We have the 49th lowest in the country, 18.4 cents. Louisiana's next at 20.93, Alabama 29 cents, Arkansas 24.7, and Tennessee 27.4. I was talking to a friend I played golf with yesterday that was visiting his adult children in the Nashville area, and they said, you can immediately tell when you're up there when you're buying gas. Yeah. It's because of the taxes for the most part.
No, that's right. And I'm sure there's going to be a robust debate of whether that 5-cent sales tax versus an increase in the excise tax versus some other mechanism. Those are all good conversations to have, and I think we all want us to have a strategic and competitive view of our neighboring states, and we don't want to lose business to them. But at the same time, we have plenty of room to establish that increase in certain revenue that's coming to the transportation system. And I really look forward to that discussion. I mean, I think that's important, and my members really latch on to that as something very, very valuable in their operations.
What about elimination of the income tax? Is that something they talk about?
Well, so it's not something that's high on their list. Now, obviously, when you talk about income tax, when you're a pass-through entity like an S-Corp or an LLC versus a C-Corp, some of those discussions get a little muddled.
That's right.
And other states that don't have a personal income tax have a different way to capture business tax. So they have a gross receipts tax or a franchise tax. I hate to say franchise because we were so smart to get rid of our
dumbest tax ever.
It was the dumbest tax. It was a tax on capital investment. This would not the franchise tax that I'm talking about in other states are a little different than that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you do want some amount of fairness across business taxation.
Sure.
So our current corporate tax rate is still pegged at that 5%. It got decoupled with our tax plan a few years ago. So that's one thing we're just going to keep an eye on and have those conversations. But overall, it's a positive development.
Okay. Well, we'll see what happens. As you said, we got a couple of weeks till the Senate releases, up to the next couple of weeks. The Senate releases their plan, and we'll see where there's overlap, where there's differences, and that's how the old sausage is made.
Yeah, the fun shall begin. That's right.
As you know, John McKay, President and CEO of the Mississippi Manufacturers Association, has been our guest. Thanks for coming in, John.